Yes, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome again to Adesoji Speaks. As you've spotted, Brother Milton is not in the house today, but filling his quite sizable boots is the man himself, the Eagle of God, as we'll call him, Azubuikwe Madujibeya. And he is going to help me look through the week in the Western press, its impact on our continent and Africans in the diaspora, and help us to, pass what we've been able to see in the last couple of weeks. And so our first story is South Africa. Why South Africa? South Africa is having their election May 29, and it will be a pivotal election considering it's 30 years since the first one in 1994. And so, but this time there's a lot riding on it. But before I go on, at least let's get Brother Azubuikwe to give us his initial take on what he considers to be the issue that's played in the South African elections. Over to you, brother.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Adesoji. Yeah, my name is Azubuikwe Madujibeya, filling in for Professor Milton's big shoes, as Adesoji said. So yes, today as we both live in the UK, we're trying to make sense of all of the stories that are current, that have historical ties, links. There's a political dynamic to all of these stories, and they affect everybody. Even if you don't know that they affect everybody. As we know, in the 90s, our brothers and sisters, after a long struggle, and Nelson Mandela, decades-long incarceration, was released, not because of the good nature of the South Africans, with F.W. de Klerk presiding over his release. Behind the scenes, there were wars raging for the liberation of these brothers and sisters against this apartheid state. A Dutch word, apartheid, which means separate, to segregate. As we know, the origins of this segregation was against our brothers and sisters in the diaspora that we call United States of America. And theirs is called Jim Crow. Yep. So our brothers and sisters, their segregation started in 1948. This is when it was imposed upon them. And that long struggle led ultimately to the release of Nelson Mandela from prison. Yep. With the assistance of international friends in Palestine, correct, in Cuba, correct, to name two. And on the continent itself, there was just a large amount of assistance given by brothers and sisters on the continent to their southern brethren. So there has been a bit of disillusionment, understandably so, by the younger generation of people who don't know their history. And the continent is replete with young generation of African people who haven't been allowed to know their history by government edict. In the country that our parents, yourself and myself, Adesoji, we come from the country called Nigeria. I often say this is a false creation by the British, 1914, as we know. Very much so. Speaking to our own relatives, you were fortunate enough to be educated there. I was born and raised here in the UK, so I didn't get that grounding in our own history. Yep. And even if I was there, maybe I wouldn't have got it, because history was banned in Nigeria, wasn't taught. So what the South Africans are suffering from now is that they too don't know their own history. As they become more aware of the things that have happened, and why are they not able to find jobs? Even just the simple things of having water. And we've been understanding no water in some areas for more than a year. Facts. I don't know how many people would be able to survive in a modern, I'll use the word modern in air quotes, to describe a modern country, because we know it's still going through the turmoil of those long, dark days. But no water, constant, what do they refer to them as? Power outages.
Power outages, yep.
Yes. And it's in that context where people think that the ANC, the African National Congress, have failed to deliver on the promise that their beloved father of the First Republic of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, was unable to seize the day and really drive home those things which have elevated them into truly a free democratic country for everybody.
But would you say he was dealt a good hand in terms of the foundation of the country itself, bearing in mind economically the country was already tanked due to the host of sanctions that was being placed on the country and the elements of economic flight at the time? But here is the problem. The political power was transferred over, but economic power was held back.
Not.
I mean, certain people were allowed into the proverbial garden, and we're now seeing the seeds of that. Not so. What's the word I'm looking for now? Not complete freedom.
Political freedom. Political freedom.
It was political freedom, not economic. Exactly.
Yes. So to use the metaphor or the analogy, as we here in the UK, of African heritage, yourself and myself, we constitute 4 or 5% in the UK totally. For people to understand, how would the larger demographic of people feel if the small percentage that we are owned 70 to 80% of the land and the economic power? How would they feel?
Correct.
Because this is what it is in South Africa. The minority demographic, the European settlers, their descendants, have the largest proportion of the land and the economic power, which was deliberately left in their possession. This is the field in which Nelson Mandela was released into freedom and then had to navigate with all of the eyes of the West bearing down on him.
Yeah.
So he had to look past his own term in office to say, what is going to be the long view for our children? They will have to finish the job that he started. He was not able to.
Now, if we were to say, if we look at South Africa at the moment, would you give it 10%, 20%, in terms 40%, 50% in terms of pass rates? Because, I mean, personally, when I look at it, I often have this conversation with people and I say, why is it that you have a country with so much promise and yet all you've given them is just false hopes, like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that had no teeth? Only recently we had a story where it was agreed that compensation will be paid to people who suffered aggression during apartheid. And there is still $120 million. But yet, there are people out here still waiting or in expectation that that compensation will be extended to them. Instead, the compensation fund has been closed. Exactly.
It's similar to the Windrush debacle here in the UK.
Yes.
No different to the HR 40, the reparations
in the United States. Exactly.
Of America and in the Caribbean. They have gone on with CARICOM. 120 million is just it. Doesn't even scratch my fingertip in what is owed to Black South Africans.
In terms of harm that has been done to them.
Indeed. So to even begin to say, do I even give them a mark of how well they've behaved, how well they've done, how far they've come?
Yeah.
Then we have to ask the simple questions. Are people able to eat? Are they able to educate themselves? Do they have decent housing? Do they have infrastructure that will enable them to move freely around in their own country? So transport networks, these types of things. If those things are not there, trying to give them some sort of arbitrary score, doesn't seem to be of any value.
Correct.
To me at least.
Correct. Yeah, no. I agree with that.
Yeah. So if we can say that South Africa have been going in that direction, they're building roads, they're building infrastructure, they're building hospitals, they're building school facilities, however they want to address these issues of education and medical accessibility, they are not there.
Yeah.
And this is the result of what we should look at. Do those things exist in South Africa? Of course, the answer is yes. Do they have hospitals? Yes. Where are they located? I'm sure they're located in the predominantly
privileged areas.
Privileged societies, exactly. So if they can have them there, why not everywhere? And then you have the problem of the bias, the discrepancies in terms of the discrimination is still rampant in that country. And we can see the inequalities in the outcomes. Job security is non-existent. Access to jobs doesn't exist, whether you have a job or not.
Correct.
So these things have to be addressed at the fundamental level. And the ANC have probably largely tried to not step on too many toes whilst trying to appease their young brethren, their black South African populists, to say things will change. People's time is going and things haven't changed for many of them. And so they become disillusioned with the process. And so fundamentally, they're stuck between this notion of a democratic process, which isn't really a democratic process. And when we use the word, it becomes difficult to justify using the term democracy because it hasn't borne them any fruit. So what's the purpose of it, which is what some people are saying. Why do we have to have a democracy if it doesn't yield us what we thought we were voting for?
I mean, one can also then extend the argument and saying it's the same privileged class, a bit with a different hue when it comes to skin color, that have engaged in so much corruption to the point where literally, with the exception of Mbeki and maybe Mandela, the rest of them have been, swimming in it, as they would say. Yes. Zuma, was found guilty.
Found guilty of contempt, of course.
Yes. Exactly. Cyril Ramaphosa is found to have decided that his sofa is now his...
his best friend.
His sofa is now his best friend in so many ways because apparently he can hold lots of money, So you begin to see where the disillusion of the street is.
Of course.
If you see people who look like you, and considering the fact that Cyril Ramaphosa was actually a unions guy. You will think a unions guy will understand the pain of the people. But no, instead, he's become part of the moneyed class. Now
he was always there. Always there.
Exactly. I mean, I heard one of his stump speeches where he says, we are going to invest lots of money in the economy, lots of money. I'm like, no numbers? No plan? That is all you're going to tell them? Lots of money. Bruh, that's not how you do it. You tell people where the money's coming from. Either you're going to raise it on taxes or you're going to increase whatever you need to increase and then transfer the money into the needed part of the economy. But to say you're going to invest lots of money, bro, that's hollow.
It's empty platitudes and empty rhetoric for a statesman who should know better. The recent presidential appointee in Guinea-Bissau, Ibrahim Traoré, what did he do? He cut the salary of all government officials by 30%.
Wow.
30%.
And he's still in a job?
Yeah, and they all agreed to it.
Wow. That's brilliant. Brilliant.
No extravagance at the top. Therefore, the people can see that they mean business. That his term of office was supposed to be capped at 3 years. The people went and protested, and said his term in office to discharge his plan will take longer than 3 years. It will take 5 years, if not 10. The people protested outside his palace to say he must stay in office for longer. The people said so.
Okay. But, I mean...
And people can see what he's doing because road construction has been rapid. So they can see with their own 2 eyes. This is what the brothers and sisters in South Africa don't see. They're not seeing the tangible.
If ANC is not pulling its weight, would you say there are credible options on the political terrain? Oh, that is a strawman argument.
It's a can of worms.
Oh, okay.
So we know that there are other parties there. They said that the number of parties, it reads like a list of credits in a movie.
Okay, let's just focus on 2. Let's focus on 2.
There's the Democratic Alliance.
Democratic Alliance.
And we go to the Economic Freedom Fighters.
Okay.
So let's just stay at those 2.
Okay, so Democratic Alliance. Let's start with Democratic Alliance. What are their chances?
Well, it's looking like in a political landscape where the ANC have held sway for so long, and they've always seemed to have reached that 50% or more in the vote share. This is going to be the first time that they don't reach that vote share, which means they will have to form a coalition. So it will then be down to the 2 next parties, the Democratic Alliance and the EFF, who are at 21% and 11% respectively, according to the polling, as to who the leading party will enter into an arrangement with. Now, in the EFF, we have many members. Any of the parties have all been splinter groups from the ANC, disillusioned with one thing or another. So the Democratic Alliance, led by a former president of South Africa, it is leading. That's Jacob Zuma. And he will gather a lot of votes. Now, whether he has any good ideas to move an agenda for the country forward is open to debate. Younger people are sounding more and more like they're the only ones who have really tangible ideas which can then be implemented into concrete plans. And that would be those in the EFF. And therefore their rhetoric is completely different, and it alarms many, many people, not just in South Africa, but also in the wider political spectrum in countries around the world. They say, we don't like this because it sounds too revolutionary. Is it revolution that South Africa needs? Is it what they require? That's not for us to decide. That can only be determined by the people on the ground.
True.
If it bears them fruit, we can look what is happening in the Sahel. The brothers have taken their self-determination in the former French colonies, Mali, Guinea-Bissau, Niger Republic. Senegal are doing something similar with the recent election of President Faye, 44 years of age. So we have to give young people a chance to be participants in their own destiny. If they don't get that chance, then we continue to be disillusioned. So the ruling party have got real problems on their hands. They cannot shut young people out. They cannot do that. And so they will have to be dragged, kicking and screaming into the 21st century. That's my feeling, at least anyway.
I mean, so that South Africa internals dynamics. Now let's which gives us a very good segue into what South Africa has initiated, and by that I'm talking about the seeking of temporary measures with the International Court of Justice at The Hague, and only last week, the court then ordered South Africa, Israel rather, to halt the Rafah offensive. And it reads, the ICJ ruled on South Africa's request for an order to immediately stop fighting in Gaza. The UN top court has ordered Israel to halt immediately its military offensive in Rafah, the southern Gaza town, to which more than 1 million Palestinians had fled fighting elsewhere in the enclave. Now, this is the path that is missing. They were actually told to go there.
They were told to go there.
They were told to go there.
It was safe.
Exactly. Okay. In another issued in response to the urgent request brought by South Africa at the International Court of Justice, said on Friday that conditions in Rafah were disastrous and that the situation had deteriorated sufficiently to issue new orders in the case. So the question is, when a case is brought, I mean, the initial case was temporary measures into provide
a report within 30 days as to the steps being taken to preserve evidence, to provide evidence and to preserve the evidence as to non-complicity in crimes of genocide, plausible genocide against the people in Gaza.
Okay.
Those reports were not provided by the Israeli government to the ICJ at all.
Instead, they doubled down.
They doubled down.
Now, so the action in itself, the seeking of redress by South Africa, has kicked into motion so many other moving parts, not least the action by the students on the American campuses, its impact on so many commencement speeches in the UK, where we're at, the kind of actions we've seen, the weekly march, in London that draws millions of people every other Saturday, and not the least the sit-ins in the universities as well. So the question then is, are we seeing signs of what transpired when the apartheid government crumbled in
the 1980s?
Yeah.
Let's take a step back. One of our favorite historians, Dr. Gerald Hall, who holds the John J. and Rebecca Moore's Chair of Department of History and African American Studies at the University of Houston in Texas, was a student at Columbia University himself in the 1960s.
The scene of the crime.
He protested. Yes, the scene of the crime. He protested at Columbia University against the Vietnam War.
Okay.
He found himself coming back to Columbia University in the 80s as a lawyer to render legal assistance to those students who were then protesting against apartheid in South Africa. And as we both know, Dr. Horn, one of our favorite historians, a scholar of over 50 books by this point, is now a commentator, as he used to be a journalist as well. So when we take the long view of what this all portends, and it's not just the students protesting, we have Ireland, Spain, and Norway just this week, the last few days, formally recognizing the state of Palestine.
And hold that horses. Apparently, France is also considering.
We'll see where that goes. We have Nicaragua have also indicted Germany in their complicity, and they have brought them to the ICJ for Germany's support for Israel's actions. We also now have Egypt have co-joined the case from South Africa against Israel, the state of Israel. So this has far-reaching implications for the whole region. The border on the Rafah crossing on the Israeli side is closed by the Israeli government. So all of the aid trucks are still there. They can't get in.
There was a skirmish this week.
Yes, there was.
Involving
the destruction of many of the
and Israeli. The first time they've shot on each other since the 70s.
Oh, well.
So things are beginning to
get very, very fractious. And this is the kind of thing that people don't want to happen, because then that will drag everybody into a conflict, which I think the Palestinians, and especially their leadership that they voted for, Hamas, didn't want to be just written out of history.
True.
If other countries are going to determine what's going to happen to them, when they have no voice or no seat at the table, because we've seen what that looks like in the Berlin Conference or the Congo Conference in 1884 in Germany as it relates to Africa.
Correct.
No Africans were involved, and we know why we speak the languages that we speak. If the Palestinians are not allowed to have their own self-determination, and they don't need our permission to be full human beings, because they are full human beings, nobody can give that to them. If you continue to deny their ability to be themselves and govern themselves in the way that they see fit, and to live in peace with everybody else that they had already been doing before the incursion or the settler colonial project which was imposed on them, also in 1948. The parallel there with South Africa is there for everybody to understand.
Parallels.
1948 is a year to behold. Because we have two others I'll mention later. We should understand that this thing can only be resolved, and we can use South Africa as the template. How did they manage to overcome the decades of segregation? One person, one vote. The state may not be the same name, but the people can still live in harmony. They can still live in peace. Now then, that comes with, are you just covering and papering over the acts of real inequality, which is what the South Africans are currently experiencing? Yes, we have to struggle to change those dynamics. The Palestinians, out of all of the people in that region of the world, have the most PhDs. They have educated themselves. They have the most civil engineers, understandably so, because if we destroy their infrastructure,
they have to rebuild.
They have to be rebuilt, and they dedicate themselves into becoming engineers, doctors, which is obviously paramount.
Very pivotal for their survival.
And so therefore their literature, which we've seen the idea of destroying all of their university, destroying their cultural heritage, their memory. They don't want them to have the ability to remember, as we have been educated and learning from our African kind of framework, our ways of knowing, our ways of remembering, cultural meaning making. If you destroy people's ability to exist, what do you think they will be left to do? And as William, the abolitionists, I've forgotten his name now, on the tip of my tongue.
Frederick Douglass, or
Frederick Douglass was an abolitionist, and the William Lloyd Garrison.
Yeah.
He was the editor of the Inquirer, was it the Liberator newspaper. He said at the time of the Nat Turner Rebellion, what did you think they would do if you so dehumanize the people, referring to Nat Turner, if you so dehumanize the person and the people, and we told you, don't do that, what avenue did you leave open for them? Because discussion was not on the table. In slavery, it was worse. There was no conversation. At least in Israel, there could have been some discussion. We have the Norway treaties, the Norway Accords that took place with Yasser Arafat, with Bill Clinton, and Yitzhak Rabin. Yitzhak Rabin, as we know, was then assassinated.
Yep.
So there have been attempts to destabilize and to derail any form of a two-state solution for the longest time, including those engaged in the current conflict now, headed by Benjamin Netanyahu, who was pivotal in destabilizing the two-state solution then. And now we can see the fruits of what he's been planning for a very long time, which is the complete displacement of everybody from Gaza.
Correct.
And then to build a pipeline of their own to siphon off the Leviathan, which is the major cache of oil that has been spotted from satellite off the coast of Gaza. This is the real reason why they're doing what they're doing. It's not because of religious hatred. It's not because of racism. It's purely and simply settler colonialism, using the tools of racism, using religious xenophobia, using all of these ways of demonizing the people, and they use biblical scripture to justify what they're doing. And they've been doing this so quietly it now suddenly came as a shock to everybody when the Palestinians, or Hamas, if you will, did what they did on October the 7th.
For me, it's the lawlessness.
Yes.
And
it's the impunity.
Yeah, it's okay, so impunity. And obviously, if you live in a quote unquote a rules-based world, certain laws are supposed to apply.
Yeah, they don't apply.
Which gives us a very important segue in the sense that recently was revealed that the Israelis were, how can I say it? Better still, it was like watching a Godfather movie when two shady characters turns up at the house of the chief prosecutor and says, if you're nice to us, we'll be nice to you. We'll take care of it.
This is the ICC, right?
Yes.
This is the ICC.
Yes.
The former ICC lead prosecutor.
Yeah, Fatou Bensouda. Of Gambian origin.
Yes.
And two things jump out at me there. It's the goal to even do it.
Yeah, but why not? Yeah, but why not? You see, this is the problem. Why not? Because they've not been curtailed in their behavior. Why not? And then we'll have to pull on those individual threads and say, what have they been doing before they did that around the world or in other places, that they went and spoke with the former Congolese president to gain assistance in this important issue for Israel. Well, what is the important issue? They don't want to be brought or held accountable for what they know is clearly not right. They already know this, which is why they've used these devious tactics to then put coercion, pressure, force on the top prosecutor, as you can see here, Mr. Yossi Cohen. Covert contracts with the ICC's then prosecutor Fatou took place in the years leading up to her decision to open formal investigations into alleged war crimes. They were just allegations.
Exactly.
And even the mere notion of that happening meant that the machinery kicked into place to say, we can't allow any claim that what we're doing has any legality or illegality about it. What we're doing, we must be allowed to do it. This is what they want. They want to be allowed to do it. And this is the purpose of the war crimes statute after the Second World War was formed because of what happened to Jewish people in Europe, in Germany.
Yeah,
is that it was supposed to prevent this from ever happening again. And
the premise was never again, wasn't it? It's
never
that
again
was a
for
promise
anybody.
to humanity. Never again.
Exactly.
And yet we're witnessing a replay by the victims of said crime are actually now the perpetrators. Now, what is further disturbing about it is the fact that, yes, the media is carrying it, but the West has not condemned.
No, they cannot.
Why not?
Because that leaves them open to culpability, which the Speaker of the House of Congress has said, we must punish Karim Khan, the current prosecutor. It's astounding. The United States of America, who were instrumental in the formation of the United Nations and the rules that govern how states should behave.
Oh, let me stop you there. You said they were pivotal to the forming of the United Nations, but they didn't form it so that you can talk back. I mean, I don't understand why people go around, pontificating. It's not for you to talk back. It's for you to be spoken to be told what to do, how to do it, when to do it. Not raising your hand, oh, by the way, I put it to you, I beg your pardon? No, that is what Mike Johnson is doing. Mike Johnson is reminding you of your place.
We're in charge.
Exactly.
We are in charge. No, but this is what Karim Khan said in an interview with CNN's
Amanpour, yeah.
Said, I've been told by senior officials that the purpose of the ICC is to arrest African leaders.
Simple. Go do your job.
That's what it's for.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to arrest people like us.
No. Don't you have any other African leaders you can go after? Exactly. You know, if you run out of a list, you know. And again, the notion that they will be held accountable to them is abhorrent.
It's abhorrent.
It doesn't make sense. It's, how dare you?
Why can't we do what we're doing? Don't you see what these things are? They don't even refer to them as people. Things, animals. Yeah. Can't you see what they're doing? They're not even human beings. They deserve to be wiped from the planet.
Imagine they're resisting. They're resisting our inalienable right to control them.
Essentially, yes.
What is the world coming to? You're not supposed to resist.
This is the proverbial foot or knee on the neck.
Yeah.
Of people, and as we know from our brothers and sisters in Haiti, where we always must look at them, 1791 to 1804, the Haitian Revolution, with the French having their foot on the neck of the Haitians, you cannot enter into any discussion about, please remove your foot from my neck. No, the Haitians chopped off the foot, and then they can have some discussion, because the French simply could not stand. So this is the problem that the Palestinians are having to deal with and face, because asking them to remove the foot from their neck historically has never happened. Dr. Gerald Horner has written copious amounts of terrible stories of complete groups of ethnic and indigenous people being exterminated in Texas alone.
I mean, the good Dr. Greg Carr of Africana Studies in Howard University often says, you're going to break it.
Yes.
And I think they are going to break it.
They are going to break the system in which they've created. They don't want anybody else to have any control over their own dignity. This is what it is. They don't want it.
Because the moment
it's astounding.
The moment you break it, what else is there? Anarchy.
Anarchy. Literally anarchy. And we've seen in the federal government in the United States of America, in the different states, especially in Texas, like we say here in the UK, if the United States of America sneezes, Europe catches a cold.
Yep.
That same premise we apply to the United States of America. If Texas sneezes, the United States of America will catch a cold. Texas has been seceded from Mexico in 1836 and only joined the Union under duress after 4 years of fighting in between 1841 and 1845. The current governor, Brian Kemp, is making overtures to seceding from the United States of America.
Yeah, well, good luck to him. Countries they don't produce anything other than oil. Okay.
But therein lies the problem. It is the oil why the United States of America is inside the Middle East, because of the oil. This is
well, they might jolly well do what they do to the Middle East and do to Texas.
They do that.
Speaking of doing things to Texas or doing things to people, President Biden, in the course of the week, had a state rolled out the red carpet for
one of the brothers from the continent.
No. You have to give him his proper introduction.
I do. William Root.
Exactly. One of the best presidents on the African continent, President William Ruto, went over to the United States and was given a state visit. He was accorded a state visit. And some would argue it was his reward for putting 1,000 Kenyan policemen on the island of Haiti.
Which goes full circle. We'll go back to Haiti.
Exactly.
Why are Haiti in the trouble that they're in? Since they took their self-determination in 1804, in their declaration, in their constitution, no more slavery. Is that a bad thing? Yes, that is a bad thing. No more slavery. In other words, no more free labor. Because the Africans who were kidnapped by the French, by the Spanish, by the British, and brought to Hispaniola, Santo Domingo, and then renamed as Haiti as they took their self-determination for themselves, it angered them. How dare you? How dare you do that? Massive financial imperatives placed on the French, and then the Americans, and then occupation by America, then the kidnap of presidents, and then the assassination of presidents. I haven't had a very good, and then earthquakes.
Yeah, earthquakes. Then major funds gathered disappearing and what have you. Now, here for me is the angle that is a bit disturbing. The fact that now we're using a blackface.
Of course. And this is why we have to be, let's add some before I say what I say. The Supreme Court in Kenya ruled it as illegal and unconstitutional for the police force of Kenya to be deployed outside of Kenya, let alone on the continent of Africa, least of all to Haiti.
Another continent.
Another continent. Illegal, unconstitutional. But we can see, because of the forces that are so hell-bent on having hegemony everywhere, that's the empire of the United States of America. It's not just a country, it's an empire. They have not wanted to bloody their hands. And so they've been corralling all of the other people. They asked the Canadians said no. They asked Lula da Silva in Brazil, he said no. So where does he go? He goes to
a former neocolonial state in Africa.
In Africa. Will you do this for us? Our president is a son of yours, referring to Barack Obama.
Yeah. They pulled a couple of strings.
So they pulled some strings, and the Kenyans have said, yes, they will do this, to the detriment of the brothers in Haiti, who have no say in any of these machinations, which is, again, problematic.
And also to the detriment of the Kenyans, who've had a say, but has been overridden.
Have been ignored. The
power of imperialism.
As we know, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, one of his many novels, neocolonialism is the last stage of imperialism.
Of course.
And then after writing his book, he was removed from office by coup d'etat.
It's a reward for writing a book, isn't it? So
exactly.
So with Ruto now agreeing to push the boat out, the Kenyan boat out to the Americans, who have now redirected the same boat to Haiti. What that does now create a problem between Africans. Can you see the divide and rule conquer now?
Yes.
So going forward now, Haitians will see Kenyans as, quote unquote, part of the enemy.
Yes.
Because you're not able to say, oh, is this guy is not this guy, is that one is not this one. You see the flag, and that's what immediately, that your mind goes to. But here's the thing. I often ask the question, why not put the questions to the Haitians? What do you want?
They want to be left alone to sort out their own problems by themselves.
No, we can't do
that. When
they
need assistance, they will direct people to say, this is what we require. Can you assist us? If there's a cost to be associated with that assistance, we will pay. And then you can have terms of agreement that will allow that assistance to be rendered. Normally, countries can give aid. There's aid development budgets, which most major countries have to distribute in order to assist countries that have suffered from earthquake, natural disasters, and so forth. We've seen how the Haitians who fled from the earthquake in 2010 ended up in the Mexico border, crossing with the Rio Grande in Texas, and being chased by horseback-ridden police men from the United States of America. This was a terrible sight to witness. Haitians who traveled all that way, given their history, to then be chased by men on horseback, to even get from Haiti to Mexico. You have to see the map to see the distance that some families have had to travel in order to just reach safety, security, have a chance for a decent life, a decent living, given the fact that your country's been destabilized, political assassinations, corruption is rampant, trafficking through the island. Everything is there, which would mean most people cannot live in safety. And the abuse of the local population, the women, is just shocking, to say the least. And they really do need to be given some time to breathe some time to rest, some time to build themselves up so that they can stand on their own 2 feet, as they've done before, and they will again. I'm sure of that. They will again.
And also, what is also troubling is there is no way to control these guys when they get over there, because for one, it's a waste of time, and it's a waste of time, it's a waste of resources, and unfortunately, nations are again going to bear the brunt
of all of that. Yes,
of all of that. Yes.
As we said, the average salary of some Haitians is $3 per day. A lot of the weapons which are being flooded into Haiti cost $1,800. You can't afford to buy them. So they're being supplied with arms from various outside actors who are interfering with their self-governance. So it becomes very, very difficult for them to even organize themselves without these factional, they call them gang warfare. These are just ex-military, ex-police, who are trying to stave off encroachment from one territory or another, and to be able to do the things that I've seen some wonderful imagery, I've seen some wonderful reports. Haitians are actually building dams, water facilities. This is not being covered in mainstream media at all. I'm following many Haitian people on social media, and I see the images. They're building dams, they're building irrigation systems so that they can farm, they can plant their own crops. At the basis of all of this, they need food security. Once they have their food security, then they can grow their food, they can feed themselves, and from that, then they can do all the other things which every other country needs to do, especially the brothers in South Africa. Food security is probably the basis of why there's a lot of these destabilization events happening across the world at the moment. Insecurity of food. And that's because of changing climate, weather patterns have shifted because of rising temperatures. This is causing people to move from their farmlands, which their crops may have failed, and they go into heavily populated areas. And then you're going to have these tensions because there's not enough facilities to service an already over densely populated community. So we see the same thing in Haiti, but there are some wonderful things happening there, for sure. So I have great faith that we'll be able to overcome the hardships.
Hopefully. Yeah. And speaking of overcoming, apparently it's considered common knowledge now that the United Arab Emirates is the one who has been backing the troubles in Sudan. And so the story reads, it's an open secret the UAE is fueling Sudan's war, and there will be no peace until we'll call it out. The Emirates is arming and supporting one side in the conflict, but the UK and the US officials have shied from confronting it. I wonder why. The Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, have been, apparently there's been 6.8 million people internally displaced and 2 million fleeing the country. The importance of this fleeing will come to later. There are 24.8 million, almost half the population is in dire need of humanitarian assistance. The United Arab Emirates is the foreign player most invested in the war. In fact, without its direct and all-round support, the RSF will not be able to wage war to the same extent. Sudan is key to the UAE's strategy in Africa and the Middle East, aimed at achieving political and economic hegemony while curbing democratic aspirations. Since 2015, it has sourced fighters from both factions to join its conflict in Yemen. It is the primary importer of Sudan's gold and has multi-billion-dollar plans to develop ports along Sudan's Red Sea coast. By supporting the RSF in Sudan, it has undermined the democratic transition that followed the 2019 ouster of Omar al-Bashir, Sudan's dictator for 30 years. Now, a host of things actually jump up in this highlighted scheme. The first is having fighters to go fight its conflict in Yemen.
In Yemen.
Can you imagine?
In Yemen.
In Yemen, which is across the sea. Yeah?
Yes.
A different continent by no stretch of the imagination.
Yes.
And it's also a primary importer of Sudan's gold. So essentially fueling the crisis.
The crisis.
And go on.
No, it's the links between all of the stories that we've spoken about so far this evening they're troubling. We have South Africa, who's touched on their 2 cases. We have the election. We have the ICJ case being brought by South Africa against Israel. We have another story I'm sure we're going to cover. The diamond importer in Israel, and outside countries interfering in the internal development of countries for their regional dominance, hegemony. And then these outside countries themselves are bound up in the conflict in Palestine. So UAE is also bound up in what's happening in the conflict in Gaza because of their unwillingness, I don't even know if that's the right word, unwillingness to lend aid to the Palestinians, because many of those other countries around Gaza, around Palestine, around Israel, have been seen not to be caring. But this is not true, because many of the people
do care.
Do care. How their governments react and how their governments behave is because of outside pressure from the largest hegemon, which is the United States of America, which has the biggest military muscle, which has the biggest financial imperative. So it literally drags everything in a direction which is antithetical to how the people want these things to be resolved.
Correct.
Ordinary people just want to be able to feed themselves, clothe their children, educate them, have decent jobs. But because of the weird places in which they live, what is under their feet, the copper, the gold, the diamonds, the uranium, the plutonium, the platinum, the cobalt, the coltan. Therefore, the way that the greedy capitalists, I mean, it's an oxymoron to say greedy capitalists.
Greedy capitalists. in the same sentence. Come on.
In the same sentence. So we can see that these outside forces have only one modus operandi. We must have those resources at any cost. At any cost.
Human and material.
Irrelevant of human or material cost. Irrelevant. Natural, it doesn't matter. We must have those resources. You and I are speaking on thousands of pounds equipment. Now we know that the components in the batteries that we're using, unfortunately, come from our brothers, the children, picking up by their fingertips the cobalt from the batteries to stop them from overheating. And this is the landscape in which we all participate. We all live in this system. It's a global system. So to extricate ourselves out of this, to say, this is not right, what can we do? Whilst we're trying to raise awareness for other people who may not know, we're still participants, even though we don't want to be, into the modern slavery that we're seeing. We have to use these words and use them, carefully, cautiously.
Yeah.
Because modern day slavery is not some magical and mystical thing happening far away. We can just, contact one of our brothers. Do you know anybody from Congo? Yes, my sister. Tell us what's happening. Do you know anybody from Haiti? Yes. Tell us what's happening. What about Sudan? Oh, my uncle is there. We know people who can tell us what's happening. So these things are not far away from us. We can reach out and ask our brothers and sisters to help us understand. And so we have to be conscious of all of the protests in Palestine, but also, as we're talking about Sudan, and the sheer number of people displaced, not even getting anywhere like the same sort of coverage that the Palestinians are having, but for different reasons. And we understand why. And then, of course, we have Congo going through the same problem.
Well, speaking of Congo, which is where we're going next, is apparently the White House is considering easing sanctions on a diamond,
Diamond dealer.
On a diamond dealer. So in the New York Times, it reads, seeking access to Congo's metals, White House aims to ease sanctions, a deal to allow Israeli billionaire Dan Gettler to cash out his mining positions in the Democratic Republic of Congo, has enraged human rights activists and some government officials. 3 years after Biden's administration tightened sanctions on billionaire Israeli mining executive for corrupt business practices in the Democratic Republic of Congo, they have reversed themselves and are offering the executive a deal they hope will bolster the supply of metal vital to electric vehicles. The plan will allow the executive, Dan Gettler, to sell off his remaining stake in 3 giant copper and cobalt mining operations in Congo. There is one part here. Okay. So that has been agreed, right? But certain state and treasury department officials strongly oppose the effort, saying Mr. Gettler should not be allowed to profit from his deal making, which the Biden administration earlier argued had cheated the citizens of Congo out of more than $1 billion in mining revenue.
It must be more than that.
Then let me read this last part. Maybe that would shed more light as to what it is we're looking at. The son of one of Israel's biggest diamond dealers, Mr. Gettler, started to invest in Congo nearly 3 decades ago. He eventually became one of the biggest holders of mining rights in the Central African nation, and the target of accusations that he has enriched himself at the expense of a population that is amongst the world's poorest. What do you say?
Well, as I said a second ago, you and I are both using devices which have got components which have come directly from Congo.
Mm-hmm.
But to castigate the small person, myself, yourself, as the main perpetrators of this would be disingenuous and intellectually lazy. How does he have mining rights in those mines? One person. How?
Good question.
Of course, there will be government officials in Congo that sign some paper somewhere to say that he has access and he has the rights, but they can't sign away the resources of the country. Remember,
True.
Professor Peter H. Russell, who teaches political science in the University of Toronto in Canada, his book on sovereignty called Sovereignty, the Biography of a Claim. Peter Russell was told to attend a meeting by tribal elders of the Dene Nation, and they asked him 2 questions. What is sovereignty? And the second question, how did the Queen get it over us? The Queen, they were referring to the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II. How did they get sovereignty? How did she get sovereignty over people that she'd never met in Canada? They were given pieces of paper in front of them by British people and told, sign. This transferred their heritage over to England.
Yeah.
This is not lawful. This is, some might argue, illegal. You can't go to a people and tell them to give their land rights away, which is what we have here in Congo. The Congolese government can't give their rights away. It's like saying the water that runs through the Congo River, we can give that to outside people. You can't give the river away. It's foolish. If you're using that as a means to produce hydroelectricity, you can't suddenly say we can give the electricity to. No, that electricity will be used, it will be stored, it then used to power infrastructure development, lighting, and all sorts of things. You can't give that away. Which is what the indigenous people in North America said to those settlers that first arrived. We can share the land. But the settlers said, no, we want all of the land. And the settlers said, if you can't own this.
Yeah. So if you're looking at Mr. Gettler's position here in terms of, quote unquote, owning sovereignty over the Congo.
Yes.
This harks back to the days of Leopold.
Of Leopold?
When Leopold walked the people, over 10 million of them, to death in the pursuit of rubber. Using the Force Republic, the military arm of the state at the time, to enforce the rubber collection. the position was so egregious that the Belgian parliament had to step in 1891. And again, we're coming back to a similar type situation that an outsider is having to step in, but not because of the people, but because of interest, their particular interest. And you can't begin to make this stuff up. So how does Congo break out of this?
They will need, again, it's like asking what did the Haitians do? It's like asking what did the Sudanese do? It's like asking what did the Palestinians do? It's like asking what did the South Africans do? It is a combination of all of the factors of people protesting, people raising awareness, people educating other people who may not know, to say, did you know that this thing is happening? Some people don't know, which is okay. And then there has to come a level of self-awareness in which then at least some people will put pressure on elected officials to say this thing must be spoken about at the highest level, because outside pressure must be brought to bear where possible to aid in the suffering and the alleviation of that suffering, because ordinary people are suffering, not least of all children. But we know that some people don't care.
Yes.
And we've seen this. They don't care. 30,000, 35,000 Palestinians have lost their lives. A large proportion of them are children. And still the bombs keep falling. So we know that they don't care. So asking the shark not to bite you, or asking the perpetrator of crime against you not to do the crime against you. As Matthew Miller, the State Department spokesman, said, that if Palestinians have a problem, they should go to the Israeli government. This is preposterous.
So you heard that as well?
I heard that. How do you tell the Palestinians if you have a case to bring and you have who has jurisdiction? You have to go to the people who are abusing you.
Go back to the basic. I mean,
it's nonsensical. It's like asking a woman, the victim of rape, to go and ask the judge. The judge was the person who raped her. Nonsense.
That was what the BBC guy asked him. Are you serious? Are you seriously answering that question that way?
Yes.
It's like, well, okay.
This is the purpose of the ICC, the United Nations, because you need an extra governmental organization which is supposed to intercede for countries in matters like this. So people have somewhere to go to say, this thing is happening for us. Can we get some help? And as we have said at the beginning of this, the international rules-based order is not, it's you do what you're told and we'll decide if we're going to stop doing what we're doing.
Facts.
And this is the problem that we're faced with.
Speaking of rules, which lends itself very nicely into our last story, is apparently the EU has been protecting the garden. Where did I hear that phrase?
Josep Borrell.
Josep Borrell. When he said the problem with these Africans is all of you want to come into the garden, you should stay
in the jungle.
My God. So, I mean, on a more serious note, it appears the EU has been incentivizing countries in the north, namely
Africa.
Mauritania, Tunisia, and more recently Egypt, Morocco as well. The odd one out being Algeria. I wonder why. And any so-called migrant that has been unfortunate to pass through the aforementioned countries has been dumped at the doorstep of the Algerians. And so the Algerians have been having to pick up the slack in terms of what's doing their responsibility. But here's the thing. In terms of the story itself, the European sides are denying, but yet you see them from time to time, as this report shows, that their actions are actually being financed.
Yes.
And with brand new buses, There is Algeria. Follow the light. The Tunisia official backed at the black immigrant. If you are seen here, you will be shot. Francois, a 38-year-old Cameroonian, obeyed jumping off the bed of a pickup truck near the desolate Algeria frontier a day earlier. The rickety boat, attempting to carry him and other hopefuls, sub-Saharan Africans to Europe, including his wife and 6-year-old stepson, had been interdicted by the Tunisian Coast Guard in the cobalt blue waters off the coast. Still wet and cold, the group of 30 migrants, including 2 pregnant women, now walked towards their punishment, the desert. Imagine.
Look at that. Can you imagine?
Imagine.
Pregnant. People they've been so disillusioned in the place where they were born, in the country that they were born in, that they saw no hope other than to flee and to then cross a water, the Mediterranean, to seek refuge, and then to be stopped, and then to face another ocean called the desert.
The desert.
It's heartbreaking because, you know, the destabilization of people, and we can see, as we mentioned, Sudan, when 20 million people, 6 million people are displaced internally. Some of them will take flight out of the continent entirely.
I mean, it's the notion that you will dump pregnant women in the deserts in the midst of no sustenance.
Yeah.
Could one count them lucky in comparison to the kids that were shot by the Moroccan guards last year? Or was it last year? Early last year.
You know, our time on this planet is short. Yeah, it's even to contemplate which one is worse, drowning in an ocean or dying in a desert.
Or dying of thirst.
Dying of thirst. You could be on the sea and die of thirst. You know. It's,
but I mean, being made to die, because essentially that's a death sentence.
Yeah. It's a death sentence, because at least if you're, I mean, we know many boats have capsized on their way from France to the UK, to the English Channel. 10, 20, 30, hundreds have perished, but many survive. So the risk of survival of that is what continues to drive them. In the desert, the chance of survival is zero. The chance of survival is zero. It's miraculous if anybody comes to your aid in the desert.
I mean, for me, the essence of doing what it is we do here is to point out the hypocrisy in the Western media, reframe the narrative so that my people can understand that sometimes the stories are sometimes hidden, sometimes they're in plain sight, but the language used is not for you. It's telling you effectively, it's saying stuff about you, but not for you. It's for their audience. Like, I mean, you read that alone, it makes you weep. 2 pregnant women. And why is one surprised if Gaza has, you know, and these are, the shocking thing is you've got all of these proponents of women's rights, children's rights, human rights, and yet all you hear is crickets.
Because the missing word from all of those phrases is white human rights, white children's human rights.
I mean, that's
unfortunately.
Oh, exactly. Because you have to make someone that looks like them in a precarious situation for them to be moved.
And we saw that at the beginning of the extended conflict with Russia and Ukraine, when the Ukrainians were leaving and being invited to many countries. Poland took the largest share of people. The British government invited many of them,
which caused many divorces.
Of course. And people ask a simple question: if you can do that for the Ukrainians, why not for anybody else?
Did somebody not say? What did somebody say out loud?
long hair, blue eyes. It's not supposed to happen to people who look like us.
There we go. We go back to the RCJ when they were said, "Oh, this is not for us. It's for Africans."
It's for Africans. There's the ICC, not the ICJ. The ICC.
The ICC.
Yes, Karim Khan. Yes, and he was told deliberately, and no doubt he's been receiving, telephone calls,
friendly ones, I hope.
Friendly ones, not from delivery, no doubt, but he may get a delivery. Not that he wants one. That's his course of action should be considered and contemplated. I think there'll be some nice language, so that he can have some understanding. But he knows that his position is precarious because of the types of things that he's attempting to do, which is to uphold international law. And if there's no law, as you said, it will just be anarchy.
True. And speaking of rules and laws and talking, it's my pleasure and honor that you're able to answer the call. And thank you very much. I mean, I've kept you way past your bedtime.
That's okay. We're both in the UK. I'm going to jump on another call now with Dr. Horn, who's got a live stream.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you have to keep the revolutionary zeal going. But any last words?
No, we continue to take abreast of all of these stories on a daily basis. We continue to pick apart the language that is being misused by journalists who refuse to want to be able to, for monetary reasons, because they fear for their own safety, to be able to bring true stories and in a truthful and objective manner, because it's a difficult task. And we know the pressure that we've brought to bear on ordinary people is immense.
True.
So we don't make light of the positions that they're in, and we don't blame them. We blame the institutions, not the people, because some people don't want to do the thing that they've been told to do. So we keep watching all of these stories. We stand in solidarity, even with our people we didn't get a chance to speak on. New Caledonia, Papua New Guinea had a recent landslide that greatly affected thousands of people. And so we continue to lift up the people who are looking for self-determination around the world. And we stand in solidarity with all of them, especially our brothers who are struggling, greatly distressed in Palestine at the moment, and Haiti more specifically.
Yeah. And yes, thank you, Eagle of God, Azubuikwe Madujibeya. It's a pleasure, and thank you very much for taking the call, as usual.
Yeah, it was. No problem.
My name is Adesoji Iginla, and Adesoji Speaks will continue next week. And until then, as we say, Aluta continua, victory asceta. Good day, everyone. Good day.